Today on the HopeFilled Financial Podcast, I'm going to tell you about something that I wanted dearly as a child. It was a souvenir Buzz Lightyear costume, and my parents turned the desire for the costume into a life lesson that I'll never forget. If you have a variable income, you're going to want to stick around for today's budget tip. It is for you. I love our listener question today. It's about what you should do if you're looking for your very first car. And for our main topic, we're going to be discussing opportunity cost and coffee. I want you to think of this main topic as a critique of a very popular personal finance example. And if you like coffee, you won't want to miss it. Good morning and welcome to the HopeFilled Financial Podcast. My name is Jay Disberger, your one and only HopeFilled Financial Coach, and I'm happy that you're here with us today. Imagine me, 6 years old, maybe 7, but I think I was 6, and I loved Buzz Lightyear. Little 6-year-old me at Disney World in one of those stores where everything is massively overpriced and they have souvenirs that kids are like, Mommy, Daddy, I want it. But I knew what I was looking for when I went into that store. I walked past every shiny piece of plastic to the little costume section in the back. And there on the wall was hanging my dream possession, a Buzz Lightyear costume. Now, there wasn't anything terribly special about the Buzz Lightyear costume other than I really wanted to just dress up like Buzz Lightyear. I go up to the costume and I start looking for the one that's going to fit me. I'd been saving up birthday money as well as coins that I'd collected from the floor in the grocery store so that I could buy this Buzz Lightyear costume. My parents had already opened up a savings account with me. They were doing a good job teaching me how to save with money. And I had never, to this point, pulled any money out to buy something. My mom was of the mindset that if I had money in the savings account, that she needed to teach me that it stays there and to never pull any of it out for anything. If I remember right, my dad was the one who suggested that you could take the money you saved up and use it to buy the costume, since the price of the costume exceeded the standard allowance, if you will, that we had for a souvenir on this trip. While I may not remember the exact amount, I'm pretty sure I had to put forward about $40 of my own money in order to buy the costume. And man, was I dead set on it, despite the fact that my dad asked me a couple times, "Are you sure?" He gave me a couple options, a couple of different things I could do with the money. He's like, you could save it, and once you get enough, you could put it in a money market, and it'll grow quite a bit by the time you're an adult. Alternatively, you could invest that money for college and let it grow a lot more, and you could do so much with the money that otherwise will go to this costume. My little boy's brain that was underdeveloped didn't see the value in any opportunity when it came to investing or saving and to holding the money for a great deal of time. I saw a Buzz Lightyear costume, and that's what I wanted. I ultimately chose the Buzz Lightyear costume, and it did bring me a great deal of joy. If you're watching the video version of the podcast, I'm going to have Amanda put the picture of me wearing the Buzz Lightyear costume over here. You can just see in my eyes how much the costume meant to me and how much joy I got out of it. Now, even though it was my day-to-day life, I was somewhat oblivious to the fact that I was growing like a weed and would very quickly grow out of the Buzz Lightyear costume, so the joy that it gave me didn't last very long. But I saved it and treasured it. It's still in the bottom of my summer clothes bin, my little Rubbermaid tub that's full of clothes for, storing the summer clothes in the wintertime so that I don't fill up the dresser or the closet with everything that I have to wear. But it did get me thinking when I outgrew the costume. I remembered what my dad tried to tell me. If you would have invested it, the money could have grown into something more. For example purposes, let's assume that I didn't buy the Buzz Lightyear costume. Instead, I invested in something that made around 4%, like a high-interest savings account or a money market account. And let's assume I left the money alone in there for 20 years. Well, if I did my math right, that would only give me about $88. Granted, the money doubled, but it took 20 years to double. Now, to my little 6 or 7-year-old brain, $88 was a lot of money, and there's a lot that I could do with it. I went around on Amazon, and I could have gotten this knife set or even this little TV. It's a small TV, and it's not the greatest quality, but still, it's a TV that we could put somewhere in the house. And I probably would be able to enjoy the knives or the TV for a longer period of time than I ended up enjoying the Buzz Lightyear costume, and arguably both of them would give me more utility. The knives definitely would be, even though they're not a utility knife. But what if I would have invested the money for college? If my parents would have opened up an ESA or a 529 and invested the money in something that averaged around 10% over a span of 20 years, well, that would have given me $293. Knowing how expensive tuition is, that nearly $300 probably wouldn't have gone very far. I bet you I could have gotten one or two of my engineering textbooks my freshman year with that. And I probably would have used the money before 20 years transpired. I had already graduated by the time I turned 26, but the example still stands. I could have taken that $40 and turned it into nearly $300, or been a little bit more conservative and gotten myself a little TV. The story served as my very first exposure to opportunity cost, a concept that we're going to tackle in more depth under the main topic. But before we get there, we need to talk about today's budget tip. Today's budget tip is if you have variable income, get a month ahead. It's very difficult when you're doing a zero-based budget to take your income minus your spending, saving, and giving ahead of time at the beginning of the month and say that equals zero, because you don't know what your income's going to be. And you may very well look at the variable income situation you have and say, a budget just won't work for me. It's going to be too complicated. It's going to be too messy, and there are too many variables since the income goes way up and down. And I know a lot of you are in the situation where you have a variable income, but there is an easy solution. I know that Dave Ramsey popularizes the idea of taking your worst month and budgeting off of it, and taking your best month budgeting off of it, and then writing somewhere in the middle with everything organized in priority, but that's not what today's tip is going to be about. I think I have a better way. If you get a month ahead, if your checking account is always going to be equal to the income you had the previous month, well, you can budget off of that. Simply use last month's income as if it's this month's income. You already know what it's going to be, so it's a fixed amount. You can put that at the top of the budget. And when you're using last month's income, removing that variability, you get over the fear of the unknown. You get over the resistance to doing a budget if you have a little perfectionism in you and you're like, I can't ever make it work for me. So what's the point? Well, now you have something that is more concrete. And as you spend last month's income that was in your checking account, that's what your checking account buffer is going to be. You're going to be refilling it with this month's variable income. And if you stick to your budget, you don't have to worry about overdrafting. Every dollar you budgeted already lived in your checking account. And as long as you don't overspend your budget before your first paycheck of that month, you're going to be perfectly fine. And beyond fixing the income variable and giving you more stability and freedom with your budget, there's one other big benefit. The alternative approach that you could use to budget with a variable income involves you listing everything in order from highest priority to lowest priority, and that fixes the way that you organize the line items in your budget. It may prevent you from grouping them in ways that I have discussed in past episodes of the podcast. Getting a month ahead frees you up to organize the budget any way that you see fit without having to worry about reordering a priority month to month and making your budget meeting at the start of the month last even longer. If you end up applying this budget tip, let me know. Let me know how it goes. Let the listeners know how it goes. We're all in this budgeting bravely thing together. Now it's time to answer a question submitted by you. Today's question comes from Reagan. Reagan asks, how should I pick my first car? What do I even look for? Reagan, this is a great question, and I am honored that you trust me with this question. For any of you who heard episode 3 of the podcast, the episode that was about prudence in the first 4 pilot episodes, you know that my relationship with choosing cars has been questionable at best. Now, I'm instead of coming at this from a car expert, I'm going to come at this from someone who has made a lot of mistakes. And my answer to you is don't make the same mistakes I did. First and foremost, don't end up a victim to car fever and rush into making decisions because you're so hungry to pick a car. Next, and possibly more importantly, stay out of car debt. Do not get a car loan, especially for this first car. Car loans and the amount of interest that you're going to end up paying on them, even if you got like a 0 down or a low interest rate, that amount of money that you're paying in interest is going to be handicapping your future. The opportunity cost that you have with a car loan can very well result in a secure and cushy financial future, a healthy retirement, if you will. So let's not start by getting behind the eight ball. Let's save up for something that is reasonable in cash. Now, when I was getting my first car, that was something between $3,000 and $5,000. Inflation and the way that used car prices are now, that's probably not going to be enough. You're going to want to be focusing somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000. And if you're in high school, you're working a job, you can easily save that much money up in order to get your first car. I believe in you. So give yourself a budget, save up, and then I want you to consider the wants that you have for your car. I don't know what you want for your first car. Do you want a pickup truck? Do you want an SUV? Do you want a sedan? Do you want a coupe? Do you want a hatchback? Do you want a wagon? Do you want one of those square Scion things with tiny, tiny wheels and excellent fuel economy? It looks like this. You got to think of make, model, size, and age. You got to think of the mileage on these vehicles, and you got to ask yourself what kind of features you expect your first car to have. It might be that you just need something that gets you from A to B, but you might not want a super ugly color if you can help it. And if I were to do it all over again, I would consider everything I wanted in a vehicle and maybe some things that I would accept in a vehicle, and I'd write them all down in a list. I'd say, this is everything that I could possibly want in my first car. Then I want you to take that list and do some research on different vehicles that could possibly fit most of your wants. On this podcast, we talk about frugality, the intentional practice of prudent economy. When it comes to economy, we want to maximize our happiness or utility per dollar spent, saved, or given. And one of the best ways I know how to do that is follow the 80-20 rule, roughly. I want you to try to pick something that has about 80% of the wants that you wrote down, and the rest of them get left behind. They get left on the table as a trade-off in order to get something that costs 20% of your otherwise dream car that would have everything you wanted and then some. Okay, we've got ourselves a budget. We have an idea of what kind of car we're looking for. What do we do next? What do we look for next? We avoid the mistakes that I made when I bought junky lemon cars that were prone to failure and being unreliable. Now, in order to figure out what kind of vehicle is going to be reliable and which one is going to be a clunker that sucks up all of your income with repairs at the mechanic, we need to find easy to understand, reliable sources that have done their homework in a way that helps us make the most informed, the most prudent decision possible. And for me, that is this website, carcomplaints.com. I almost died when I found this website after buying so many cars that just fell apart on me. I'll give you an example here while we have the website up. If you're watching the video, I'm going to go ahead and show you, I think it's the second car that I ended up having. It was a Volkswagen, and it was a Volkswagen Passat. You see the numbers on this website. They count the number of issues. There's only one other car that Volkswagen made that was worse than the Passat, and that was the Jetta. So if I click on it and I find the year on here that I owned, I gotta hit this little arrow and scroll. I could have gotten a worse year. I guess 2003 was the worst year to get a Passat, according to this website. But I had a 2002, and if I click on it, it gives me a list of the common complaints, and I can do some research, but conveniently they give this avoid like the plague stamp up here in the corner, and that tells me just do not do it. There's also a warning here that says donate your Volkswagen Passat. It's time to move on. Donate your car in minutes. They got a little thing that you can click here to donate. Don't click there. I'll show you one other thing on this website that I think is really cool. They have a list of the worst vehicles that you can buy, but they also have a list of the best vehicles that you can buy when it comes to reliability. Here they organize the best vehicles by make and then the model. You can see Toyota has a huge list of vehicles that have been healthy and reliable used purchases. So if you were, say, wanting a small Toyota and you were looking at something that was a little older with good miles, you could click on this Toyota Echo. Now, that's not to say that I'm saying, get this car. I'm not sponsored by anything in that regard. But when you pick one and you're trying to do research on it, you can do this. You go to the main page for the car that you're thinking about and hit complaints. Now, the complaints that they list are going to be from the most frequent to the least frequent, and the top here is body and paint problems. I personally don't care about that. I'm concerned about things that are going to be a reliability problem, not a cosmetic problem. Next is the AC or heater. So if you were looking at this, you might check the AC or the heater, make sure it blows really cold air, make sure that it heats up, crank it all the way down, crank it all the way up if you're test driving. There's brake problems, look at the brakes, maybe have your mechanic look at it and see if the brakes are falling apart at all. I myself have had brakes fail on me on the highway. It's not fun. Next, there's a fuel system problem and a light problem. And if you needed more information as to what you're looking for, it's fuel hesitation. And you can click on it and dig into the actual specifics. It'll tell you what average mileage this particular issue shows up. And they're going to do that with every possible problem you'll run into with cars. To recap, be prudent, gather information, gather knowledge, figure out what the common issues are for the cars as you narrow them down and you start to go look at them, you start to test drive them, see them in person, and ask yourself, are these cars victims to their common issues, even if they're arguably reliable cars on the whole? And if you do all that, you're going to be able to move forward and purchase your very first car with confidence and purchase a car that hopefully doesn't become a headache for you down the road. Reagan, I hope that answer was helpful to you, and I hope it was helpful to all of you listening. And if you have a question that you would like answered on the podcast, leave them in the comments below if you're watching on one of the video platforms. And if you're not, you can always go to the HopeFilled Financial website, hopefilledfinancial.com, scroll to the bottom, and there's a little form where you can type up a question and send it to me. And I'll be sure to answer it as a part of a show in the future. Now, time for today's main topic. For today's main topic, we're going to be critiquing a very common example that financial influencers, financial gurus, financial advisors, financial coaches use to explain opportunity cost. And we're going to be digging into the way that it makes us feel, and we're going to dig into what does this mean for our relationship with money, and is it an example that's actually productive? To get started, we're going to consider a CNBC clip featuring Suze Orman. Now, I'm not a big fan of Suze Orman or her work, and I could get into that for other reasons, but that's beside the point. What I want to share with you is what she said here in this clip. Pay close attention to the point she's trying to make.
It would be one thing if you had a cup of coffee once a week, maybe 3 times a month, but that's not what you do.
I got to point out for those of you who are listening on audio only that on the bottom of Suze Orman's name, they dropped her Twitter so that you could reach out to her there, and it had the old Twitter logo. So you know this is an older video than the last couple months.
You go in every single day. It's a ritual. It's part of your day. And you spend $1 to $3 on a cup of coffee, which is approximately $100 a month. An example, $100 a month in a Roth IRA over 40 years is $1 million.
Now, the math that she's doing here is not wrong. The math is solid. And after we get through this little video, I'll show you how you can verify her math.
So you need to think about it as you are peeing $1 million down the drain after you're drinking that coffee. Do you really want to do that? No. Can you just make coffee at home? Every single penny counts. It's not a need, it is a want.
Now, I got to stop here and say, she mentions that you make the coffee at home as opposed to getting it out at a Starbucks or a coffee shop. The point she's trying to make is, well, you have a spending habit that has an equal opportunity cost, arguably, of $1 million 40 years from now. However, what's the opportunity cost of making the coffee at home? Well, it's not the same amount of money you're still spending on a habit. So you fall into a little bit of a slippery slope. Where do we draw the line from little expenses on our day-to-day? Where do we draw the line and say, the opportunity cost for this isn't great enough? You give any particular example enough time at the right interest rate, and you're going to say, oh, this is costing you your whole financial future.
Peeps, if you just simply used your money to purchase needs versus wants, you would find the money to invest in your retirement accounts. You would find the money to get yourself out of credit card debt. You are just really wasting money.
She says here, if you spend on your needs and not your wants, you're going to have enough money to save up for retirement or pay off your debt. But it's a little more nuanced than that. We can't give up every want and say no to every want in our life. We are called to spend, save, and give. And part of that is going to be enjoying the money that we earn. To do otherwise could be detrimental to our human psychology. Now, there is a balance that we need to approach, and it's not good to spend on wants in a way that sacrifices our future. But what we don't want to say is by spending on any want, regardless of how expensive that want is, I'm killing my financial future. There are ways we can have our coffee and drink it too. Next, we're going to watch a little bit of a video from a YouTube channel called How Money Works. And I think this particular creator has done an excellent job compiling examples where the coffee opportunity cost example is heavily utilized.
Instead, just put that $3 to $5 you're spending every day on coffee into a Roth IRA and let that compound over the next 40 years in an index fund. You'd have over $1 million. Now, how does that make you feel that your daily cup of coffee is leaving $1 million on the table?
Never do I do that. Never. That's such a waste of money for something that costs 20 cents.
Spending more money on coffee than you do on retirement is ridiculous.
A 2022 survey conducted by the Lending Club Bank found that more than a third of people earning over $250,000 a year were living paycheck to paycheck. And if someone earning 4 to 5 times the national average can't get ahead, then what hope do the rest of us have? A popular trend amongst financial influencers is to blame people's poor personal money situations on small but repetitive purchases, with the number one target being coffees. I mean, seriously, it feels like anybody that has ever posted a video about how to make $100 a day in the current year with little to no experience or trade stock options for a profit seems to hate coffees as much as they hate the efficient market hypothesis.
So what we can see from that clip from How Money Works is that the coffee example is heavily utilized even with the exact same numbers that Suze used. $100 a month for 40 years, invested in a Roth IRA at, I think it was 10%. Next, what I want to do is show you how you can verify the numbers in that particular example. And that's going to be by using a retirement calculator. You can find a whole bunch of them for free online. The particular one that I have here, if you're able to watch the video, is from Ramsey. It's ramseysolutions.com. He has a retirement calculator. Now, there's going to be a little input over here on the side, and we want to make sure that it's 40 years. So we're going to just make it easy. I'm going to say that I'm 20 now, and I'm going to be 60 later. How much money do you currently have in investments? To make the example work with the coffee, let's assume I haven't bought any coffee yet, and I don't have anything invested from having given up the coffee. Next, it says how much are you going to contribute monthly? In the example, they talked about doing $100 a month given the average-ish cup of coffee at Starbucks. I'm going to say right in the middle of what Ramsey has. He says the S&P 500 has been roughly 10 to 12%. We'll do 11 right in the middle, and we'll hit calculate. While using these inputs, what we end up with is $860,000 in retirement. That's not quite the $1 million that Suze Orman promised us. I'm sure if we tweak this a little bit, we could see what it is. Let's say if we did 11.5. There we go. They must be using 11.5 as that is just over $1 million. Now, just to show you how sensitive this interest rate is as I fiddle with it, if I type in 10% into the calculator, the coffee habit, the opportunity cost of the coffee habit is $632,000. That's a huge swing. That's going to be probably half of what it would be if I typed in 12%. 12% gets me almost $1.2 million. So the math roughly checks out if you're a little aggressive with the interest rate, but I want to point something out that's pretty funny. If I scroll down on the calculator here, there's a nice little graph, and that's great. It shows us where we are with the retirement, and it shows the growth of the portfolio over the years and gives some other fun information. But underneath that graph is a nice little what if. And it says, what if I gave up daily coffee purchases? It's the example right in the middle. And Dave Ramsey's website assumes that your coffee habit costs you specifically $128 a month. And it says that if you added another $128 to your investment, instead of doing coffee, you get $1.444 million in additional growth. So even Dave Ramsey and his website with this calculator can't escape using this particular example that coffee is costing you your retirement future. And I mentioned it before when I was reacting to the Suze Orman clip. We run into a slippery slope when we say, well, you got to give up this particular habit, this very popular, socially acceptable habit with little expenses day after day, because the opportunity cost is huge. But we could do that with absolutely anything. And the opportunity cost of coffee doesn't necessarily have to be investing for retirement. It could be anything. When I was talking about the Buzz Lightyear costume in the story, the opportunity cost that I gave as an example was a knife set and a TV. But I could have chosen anything that cost less than $90 as my opportunity cost. So how am I to know what my opportunity cost actually applies to? Dan Arley has a quote that covers this point. The problem with opportunity cost is that opportunity cost is divided among many, many things. Every decision we make has trade-offs, and all of these trade-offs are absolutely infinite. And when we start digging into this rabbit hole of, oh, I can't do that because it's going to cost me too much in retirement, and we weigh it heavily on that, or we try to consider every possible opportunity cost for every decision we make, we're going to be suffering from paralysis of the analysis. We're going to end up stunting our ability to make decisions and preventing us from enjoying our spending and saving and giving that we can execute today, and possibly cost us the future. If we're victim to paralysis of the analysis, what's to stop us from considering the infinite amount of opportunity cost when it comes to building a retirement portfolio? Now, that's not to say that opportunity cost is a bad thing. I personally love the idea of considering opportunity cost, but we need to get over the problem of infinite comparisons. And we need to not feel bad every time we pursue a want, even a little one. I mean, Suze Orman's words, if I took them for granted, and even some of the words at the start of the How Money Works clip, I don't want to have to carry the emotional baggage of my future is disappearing every time I buy a want. So what's the real solution here? We need to not just take every possible opportunity cost into account. We need to take the practical opportunity cost into account. We need to take your opportunity cost into account. What would be the thing that you would do if you didn't have the money? Imagine you gave up your coffee habit. If you have one, you give it up. What would you actually spend the money on? Would you pursue a different type of habit? Would you end up absorbing that saved money in another lifestyle expense? Would you actually save it? Would you pay it down on debt? Would you use it to save up for another want that is important to you? Or if you're not running a budget, do you know where that money would actually go? Speaking of budgets, that's the beauty of the zero-based budget. If you assign every single dollar a mission in your zero-based budget, and you decide to cut something out, say the coffee, say $5 a day, or roughly the $100 a month, you get to say, where do I put that $100-some this month? I have to assign it to another category. Well, as you look through your options on your budget, you're going to be thinking of your goals, you're going to be thinking of your priorities, you're going to be thinking about where you are in your financial journey, and you're going to apply that $100-odd-some accordingly. That is the comparison. What you're going to pick instead of the coffee, that is the opportunity cost that you need to be considering, because it is the actual decision that you're trading off, the next best thing to the coffee. Furthermore, investing the money that you would save by not spending money on coffee may not be the best decision for you. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, the next thing you probably need to do if you're kicking a coffee habit in order to have a little extra room in your budget is save up a starter emergency fund. And if you already have a starter emergency fund, you might be setting up appropriate, updated insurance policies to protect you and defer the risk that you can't afford to take on right now. And if you already have that in place, you might be paying off your debt. You might be running a debt snowball, paying off your debts, smallest to largest. If you're debt-free, You have all of that in place. You might need a fully funded emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses. And after that point, after you've been able to do that, well, now we can talk about investing, but it might also be prudent for you to be considering saving up for a home down payment. There are a lot of different decisions that you could make that aren't just investing in that Roth IRA. So we know that a budget can free us from the complexity of opportunity cost. It can prevent us from having paralysis of the analysis. And what really matters is when we're running our monthly budget, asking ourselves, are we making healthy progress on the big financial priority I need to have in the HopeFilled Financial Footsteps, available on the homepage of HopeFilledFinancial.com. More or less, I was running down the first few HopeFilled Financial Footsteps as I went through that list of potential uses for an extra $100 a month. Now, as we wrap up, I want you to think about this. If you are writing a budget and you say, I am on footstep 1, I'm on footstep 2, 3, or 4. Let's say you're on the one where you're saving up for an emergency fund, and you say, I need to have my fully funded emergency fund established in 3 months from now. That's really what I want to do. You know where you are, you know how much further you got to get, you know how much you need to set aside in order to achieve that goal. And while I want you to be running and sprinting toward that goal, you can see in your budget whether or not you're on pace. And if there's any extra wiggle room, you can probably afford to give yourself some sort of one. If you're saving up for retirement, if you're trying to set aside enough for retirement, you can sit down, run the numbers, figure out how much you need to be investing each month in order to have a healthy retirement, to be able to retire with dignity. If you know that number and you're putting that number aside, you're debt-free, you have your emergency fund, you're investing, and you still have discretionary income to buy coffee, well, guess what? The $1 million, $1.4 million of opportunity cost isn't the opportunity cost of the coffee, because you're probably not going to go and put that extra money in retirement. You would have something totally different you would spend it on. And while I don't know the exact decision you'd make, you probably aren't wanting to oversave for retirement. You want to enjoy some of your money today. And that's why I think that this particular example, the coffee example, is ultimately unhealthy. It makes you feel bad when the genuine opportunity cost is not talked about, the actual decision-making process and the focus on what can help you really hone opportunity cost appropriately, a monthly budget. Now, next week on the HopeFilled Financial Podcast, we're going to be discussing withdrawal strategies, the 4 types of things that you can prioritize in retirement and what it means for your retirement portfolio and your retirement withdrawal strategy. I'm really excited to share this incredibly valuable topic with you because it's something that I just don't think that we talk about or consider enough in our society. Be sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss it. But until then, until next Tuesday, budget bravely and enjoy your hope-filled financial future.